What's happening, everybody? You're listening to the Strangeland podcast. My name is Kenny. I'm here with my good friend and co-host, Stefan. How you doing tonight, Stefan?
Doing good, man. Glad to be here with you.
Yeah, me too, man. This is the 18th episode of the Strangeland podcast. You can find us at strangelandpod.com and email us at thestrangelandpodcast@gmail.com. That's thestrangelandpodcast@gmail.com. And you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, if you search up Strangeland Podcast. And yeah, thank you everyone for listening. We're finally starting to get some good download and listen numbers. So yeah, again, if you want to talk to us about anything or suggest any episodes, send us an email and we'll definitely reply to you.
Yeah, our numbers have gone up quite a bit lately. So thanks to everyone who supports the show. We appreciate you guys.
Definitely. So what are we talking about tonight, Stefan?
So today's episode, man, I'm super excited. Today's episode, we'll talk about the death of Dimebag Darrell Abbott and 3 other victims who were tragically gunned down while Abbott was performing in the Alrose Villa nightclub in Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah, who was Dimebag Darrell? For anyone that doesn't know who's listening.
Right. So Dimebag Darrell is most known for his lead guitar position in Pantera. I mean, this guy was basically a guitar god of our time.
Yeah, especially among musicians. I mean, so Pantera was founded in Dallas, right, in North Texas, and
Right.
And that's where Dimebag's from. That's where his brother Vinnie Paul, who's very relevant in this case, is from. And we're from Dallas, or at least we grew up in Dallas.
Yeah,
I'm from
totally.
Dallas for sure. And I'm a musician, I'm a drummer, and I've played in a lot of metal bands growing up. And Pantera was a huge part of my life. I remember exactly where I was at whenever he died. Or I remember hearing the news the day
Right.
of. I was 14 years old, and this is a really crazy time. It's timing that we have, right? Because we've been
Right.
planning this episode for about 2 weeks or so.
Yeah.
The idea came to us and we said, okay, let's do that. That sounds good. Well, just 5 days ago on Friday, Vinnie Paul, who's Dimebag's brother, died as well.
Right. Passed away in his sleep.
Exactly. And so it's kind of a big deal. Dimebag died on December 8th, 2004. And just by coincidence, right when we're about to do this episode, his brother Vinnie Paul, who was the drummer of Pantera, died as well. And so, I want everyone to just remember one thing whenever we're talking about this, when you're listening to this episode. It's really easy to feel for the families and for the victims in all of these cases when you listen to them through podcasts. But a lot of them are older, and it's not like it just happened. And in this particular case, didn't just happen, but Vinny just died. And so it's, when you're listening to this, please keep your thoughts with the family, because not only did they lose a son and a brother in 2004, 14 years ago, but they just lost another son and brother in just 5 days ago. So just keep that in your mind, because while they have been suffering for the last 14 years, they are most definitely suffering even more at this very moment.
Yeah, most definitely. Rest in peace, Abbott brothers. So Dimebag's death would leave many people in the world in horror and in awe, especially in the metal community. It was a huge shock to everyone. Questions about the safety precautions for the crowd and the musicians themselves would arise after this terrible event occurred. And sort of just like with the Christina Grimmie situation too, that really shook a large part of the music community.
Yeah, and before this, it was kind of just okay for fans, especially at metal shows, to jump on stage and then jump into the audience. So, you would be carried.
Right.
And before this, it was kind of okay. People would just do that. They would just jump on stage, kind of rock out, and then jump into the crowd.
Or do whatever. Sometimes they put their arms around the musician.
Yeah.
All sorts of crazy shit.
It was a thing like that. But after this, it became a huge deal to not do that. And I just remember reading stories about, from Vinnie Paul and other people saying that whenever this happened after Dimebag's death, when someone would jump on stage, the security would just go right after them, and they would just be like, you know what, you can't do that anymore. That used to be a thing, and now it's not. And so,
Right. Unless you're at some punk rock show at a hole in the wall, you know what I
Exactly.
mean? But
Yeah.
you're not going to run up on the stage of Damage Plan and do that. No
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. Exactly.
So people around Dime would actually describe him as a loving, determined, and energetic leader that never got a big head about his success, and he always remained down to earth. These guys were always with their fans after shows. They were partying with everybody and drinking and having a good time. And there's a ton of pictures. I mean, every musician has a ton of pictures with their fans, but it was clearly something special they had going.
Yeah, Dimebag would just take pictures with anyone. One of our friends at work, Tony, he's probably not going to listen to this, but he posted a picture of himself with Dimebag, or with Vinnie,
With
at
Vinnie,
least,
Paul.
on Facebook. So he may have had a picture of him with Dimebag, but Dimebag took tons of pictures with all the fans. They would definitely go out of their way to take pictures. And just to let everyone know, we talk about Pantera. But whenever this happened on stage, it was with the band it was with the band Damage Plan.
Right.
Yeah, which was a later band of Dimebags and Vinnies.
The aggressive sound of Pantera would skyrocket the band into popularity, subsequently solidifying the band's place among people like Eddie Van Halen and bands like Black Sabbath. Even though Pantera was broken up at the time of Dime's death, his death would ensure the world would never quite hear anything like that again.
And that's so true. I didn't really think about that too much before this, but his sound, Dimebag's guitar sound, was so unique. I mean,
so different, man.
yeah, anyone listening who knows Pantera and listened to Pantera, his guitar sound was absolutely mind blowing, and it was so unique. You just never really heard anything that sounded like that before he started doing it.
Yeah.
It was, I don't know. I don't play guitar, so I can't really describe it. But just listen to
No.
it if you've never really listened to
Yeah.
Pantera.
No guitarist ever quite played that funky. I mean,
Yeah, seriously,
Dime was a funky guitarist.
Yeah, and on that note, Vinny was very unique as well. Most people don't really think about that, but Vinny's drum style was very unique. All of his toms were really big, and they were like bass drums almost. It was pretty amazing.
Right.
Gave him a really unique sound. And, we're going to talk a lot about Dimebag and Vinny in this episode, and we're going to talk a lot about Pantera, because all of this leads up to the night in question. The night that he was murdered, it all has to start with, sort of a brief history into Dimebag and Vinny and Pantera itself.
Yeah.
But 3 other people died that night, and 7 people were injured. And it wasn't just the death of a famous guitar player. It was the death of 4 people. And
Right.
we will 100% get into them as well, especially when we're talking about the night of the murder. I just want to let you guys know that it's not just Dimebag, but we're going to talk a lot about him, obviously, because this was direct. It was mostly directed at him.
Right.
And so Darrell Lance Abbott, or Dimebag Darrell, was born on August 20th, 1966 in Abilene, Texas. He was the son to Carolyn and Jerry Abbott, and Jerry was a country musician and a producer of country music. And Dime's brother, Vinnie Paul Abbott, was born 2 years prior, in 1964. The 2 brothers were always known to be very close and always stuck together. And even long into their lives, the 2 brothers would be, they would stay very close. And even at one point, later in their lives, Dave Mustaine, who was the singer and guitar player for Megadeth, wanted to recruit Dimebag as the guitar player. But Dimebag insisted that he bring his brother along as well. And Megadeth at the time already had a drummer, and so that wouldn't work. But that shows really how close the brothers are. Dimebag would not leave his brother's side. He wanted to play with them. I mean, they'd been playing since they were kids, and he wasn't going to go to another band unless he could bring his brother along.
I mean, that's loyalty if I've ever heard it. It's like, hey, you want to join Megadeth?
Yeah, exactly. And this was back before Pantera was big.
Right.
And so he clearly probably would have went if they could have taken Vinny as well, but they couldn't, and so he didn't go. So yeah, you're right. It's very loyal. They're very loyal to one another.
Right.
And so as a young boy, Abbott would meet, or Dimebag, would meet his first longtime girlfriend, Rita Haney. And while the 2 were actually in 3rd grade.
And they were together when Dime had passed.
Yeah, so they'd been together for a very long time.
Quite a long time.
And they met as
yeah.
little kids and stayed in touch, I guess, and stayed together. So
Right. So on Dime's 12th birthday, he would receive a gift that would change his life forever. His first guitar, which was like a Les Paul type style guitar. If you don't play guitar, you won't know what that means, but our guitar players will. And about 2 years later, after receiving his first guitar, he would enter in a ton of guitar contests around his local area, which was like Arlington, Texas. Um, Abbott was so dominant that the people who held the contests would ask him not to enter because they wanted to give other people a fighting chance. I mean, it's crazy. He would just own everyone as soon as he
Yeah,
went
he
in.
won like every single contest, like 7 in a row, right?
Yeah, 7 in a row. And this is actually a quote I pulled from him for an interview while he was talking about his guitars. He says, quote, "After I won seven of them, they told me, okay, now you're the judge. They made me the judge, and it was very fucking cool."
And remember, he started these contests when he was 14 years old. He got his guitar when he was 12, and it was 2 years later that he started this. So he's kicking everybody's asses at the age of 14.
Right, and not only playing guitar, but he had a knack for writing music. This guy was just an all-around musician.
Yeah, and he was heavily influenced by the band Kiss, and this is something you see on a lot of his guitars. Everyone knows who Kiss is. Their painted faces and Gene Simmons' long tongue.
Iconic.
Yeah, you would see he had, I don't know if it was painted or if it was a sticker or something, but it looked like paint, but it was basically all 4 of Kiss members' faces on his guitar underneath the fret, I think, the fretboard. So they were really into Kiss, and he really loved Ace Frehley and his guitar playing. And Vinnie Paul also was a huge fan of Kiss's drummer Peter Criss, which is strange because I don't really think Peter Criss was that good, but
Yeah.
that's just my opinion. Whatever. As the 2 brothers got older, they began to get even more serious about their music. And their parents, being musicians themselves, would fully support both brothers in all of their music endeavors.
Yeah, so they really set a tone early on in their life that, listen, I want to do this. I have a natural knack for this. We're going to go for it.
And seeing that Vinny just died 5 days ago, I want to talk just a little bit more about him. Of course, like we've said, he was the drummer for Pantera. He was brother to Dimebag. And when he first got into music, both of their, Dimebag and Vinny both got into it because, their parents were into music, like we just said. But when he originally went to the band director at school to play an instrument, like most kids do, he was given a tuba. And so he took the tuba home and he was playing it. And his father actually didn't like the idea of him playing the tuba. And
I don't blame him.
Yeah, and he actually thought he'd be a good drummer. So he signed him up for the snare instead, to play snare. And so, and it took a couple years, but eventually he got a drum set, and the rest is history. And Dimebag, he actually had wanted to originally play the drums as well, but he wasn't picking up on them as quickly as his brother. So his brother was really good. He was kind of a natural at drums, and Dimebag was a natural guitar. And so that's, where they went their separate instruments and then started playing them together.
So in 1981, Dimebag would form Pantera with his brother Vinnie on drums. Other band members would include such people as Terry Glaze on guitar, bassist Tommy D. Bradford, and Donnie Hart on vocals. Now, after Hart left the band, Tommy Bradford would then stand in as the vocalist. And in 1982, Bradford just left the band altogether, and they bring in Rex Brown. At first, Pantera actually didn't sound anything like what you think of when you think of Pantera. After all, this was the 80s, and the band had a noticeably more glam metal type of feel. I put that in air quotes.
Well, if you look at them on stage, there's pictures of Pantera's early years, and
Right, they're in spandex.
yeah, they're nothing like they were, in the late '80s and the early '90s.
It was almost like a Motley Crue-ish type of
Oh yeah,
look.
that's pretty much that's very much what it was. And after about 7 years, the band would meet 19-year-old New Orleans native Phil Anselmo, who was a vocalist, and would begin to resemble the heavy metal sound that we now associate with the band. During the early and mid 90s, the band would start to receive its first glimpses of notoriety as a serious contender in the heavy metal scene. And with the release of Cowboys from Hell in 1990, Pantera would introduce a different groove metal style that would help the band reach its popularity. In 1994, after the release of the band's album Far Beyond Driven, Dimebag Darrell would be listed under a different alias in the credits. Abbott changed his name to Dimebag Darrell, and the rest is history. And yeah, it's worth to mention that Pantera received their first Grammy nomination in '94 as well.
I was 3 years old.
I was 4, so we're super young.
So in 1995, vocalist Phil Anselmo would start to use heroin pretty regularly and start to form a dependency. Now, this is notable information because it starts to sow a bad seed within the band. Now, in 1995, Pantera is huge. Like you just said, they got their first Grammy nom in 1994. In 95, I think the rock star lifestyle had kind of gone to Phil at this point, but whatever. A year later, in 1996, Anselmo would actually overdose backstage at a Pantera concert, and he was taken to the hospital. The whole band loved to party, no doubt, and even Dimebag was known to be a super heavy drinker, but Phil's heroin use and lack of responsibility would spike tensions within the group. And they, like I said, it eventually created a rift. Now, specifically between the Abbott brothers and Anselmo. Now, in 2001, this is 9 Pantera studio albums later, the band would go on hiatus after communication between all the members had basically come to a halt. Phil claimed that he had been suffering from terrible back pain caused by the demanding nature of, being a heavy metal vocalist, messing up your body, headbanging and doing all that. So he basically had to cope by using massive amounts of heroin and alcohol.
And by that time, of course, he'd been on heroin for many years, and
right.
He was just addicted to it. I mean, he couldn't get off of it.
Which I even buy his story. You know what I mean? I feel like he probably had his own demons going on.
Well, I'm sure it was a mixture of things. It was probably a mixture of him hurting, probably both physical and mentally, and just the ease of access to drugs like that as a rock star, especially like the main vocalist of this huge metal band in the 90s. It's just very easy to get into that sort of thing. And it almost seems like Phil just needed a break from Pantera. That's what he told his bandmates. But during this time that they were on hiatus, he began working on multiple side projects and not really communicating that well with Dimebag or with Vinnie. And so, it started to, I'm sure, annoy the brothers. And eventually in 2003, they would officially break up. And they would no longer wait around, sitting on their hands for Phil. They decided to take the next step of their musical career. And after a year or so, the brothers formed Damage Plan, a heavy metal band, which continued to feature the Pantera-style groove metal sound. The brothers recruited former Halford guitarist Pat Lachman on vocals, Lockman, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, I'm sorry, and Bob Zilla on bass. Damage Plan released its first studio album, Newfound Power, in the United States on February 10th, 2004, and it debuted at number 38 on the Billboard 200, selling almost 45,000 copies in its first week.
And this is really relevant information here. This band formed, pretty much right after they break up with Vinnie, after, not right after, but pretty soon after, like 2 years or so.
I mean, Pantera broke up in 2003. And the night in question, which we're about to get into, the night of the shooting happened in 2004.
Right.
I mean,
and it happened in December of 2004. But so Damage Plan had their first studio album in February, and the murder occurred in December of that year.
Well, yeah, and they've already been touring this whole time.
Right.
This is when it happened while they were on tour. So this happened pretty soon after this, and after they broke up, Phil and Vinnie and Dimebag were all really not getting along at all. I mean, in the media, they started to really insult one another. Dimebag and Phil would just insult, or Dimebag and Vinnie, I mean, would insult Phil, and Phil would throw stuff in return. And Phil even went on to say that Dimebag deserved to be severely beaten. He said this to the media, to I think a magazine called Metal Mayhem. I could be
Right.
wrong, but
I mean, these guys are rock stars, rough and tumble. They say all sorts of crazy stuff. It's an ego game, you know what I mean?
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So we're gonna get into the night of the shooting here, but first I thought it was important to talk about the victims. And I think it's just best that we sort of give like a short overview of who they were. We'll get into it more, but I felt it important. Now, obviously, Dimebag himself was shot and killed during this event. Also, the band's head security guard, Jeff Thompson, was killed. Nathan Bray, who was a Damageplan fan attending the concert that night, and Aaron Hulk, who was an employee of the Alrose Villa nightclub, and he was also a former U.S. Marine.
Yeah, and wasn't he one of the ones trying to give CPR to Dimebag? Yeah.
Yeah, I believe. Yeah, that was Aaron.
Yep.
Now, on December 8th, 2004, Damageplan, along with several other bands, would arrive at the Alrose Villa nightclub and begin to set up for their concert. As the evening drew near, about 250 people would show up to support the band and, hear Damageplan play. They wanted to see the Abbott brothers.
And that's really not that many people.
No.
I mean, this club, do you look at pictures on this? Pictures of the...
I saw the outside. I didn't see the inside.
Yeah, I saw a little bit of both, and this is a really small club, honestly. And so, 250 people, that was probably pretty packed in there. But that's not that much. It was a pretty small show. It wasn't like a big, huge venue, a big concert, like a big stadium or anything like that. This was a pretty small show.
Now, among those people that were to attend that night was a 25-year-old Nathan Gale, who was an ex-Marine and a semi-pro football player for the Lima Thunder. That night, Gale was seen in the venue's parking lot all by himself while the opening bands played. Now, keep in mind, this is December in Ohio, so it's freezing cold outside.
Yeah, and Rolling Stone magazine reports that a fellow fan approached Gale at some point during the night while he was still in the parking lot and asked him why he wasn't inside watching the show. And Gale sharply replied, "I don't want to see no shitty local bands." When the fan replies with, "You can at least go inside and stay warm," Gale simply replies with, "No, man, I'm going to wait for Damageplan." And so, he's just out in his car, like you said. It was basically 40-degree weather. That's what they said that night. It was around 40 degrees. Just hanging out in his car, just waiting for Damageplan.
That's freezing for us.
Yeah, I mean, we're in Texas.
We're dying at that point.
Right. So he's just waiting for Damageplan to get on so he can go in and do the business. And as the brothers and Damageplan take the stage, they were only about a minute or so into their first song of the night when Nathan Gale would hop the 6-foot fence on the venue and enter through a side entrance. So he wasn't in the crowd. He hadn't been in there listening. He wasn't doing anything.
He didn't even pay for a ticket.
No, he didn't actually show up. We say that he was in attendance, but he was only there to do, to murder people. He wasn't actually watching anything. So he went through the side entrance, and he was actually told earlier to leave the premise by a club employee. And this is because he'd been out there in the parking lot, like we just said, for a long time. He'd been told
weird.
I think he'd been told to move 3 times because he was blocking traffic.
Right.
And so I think the employees were already kind of onto him, but he was able to sneak in through a side door. And he had a 9mm Beretta handgun. And Gale would make his way toward the stage that was described by the patrons as at a determined pace. And if you watch the videos, you can go online, just Google it. It's probably on YouTube. I've watched them. It's really hard to find uncut videos of this, but you could probably find it. But they had cameras inside the club that night.
There's cell phone footage of it too.
Yeah,
out
there's
there.
cell phone footage. They have multiple angles from the security cameras that night that you can watch, and yeah, you just see him just speed walk across the stage,
Right.
looking directly at Dimebag. Um, yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, it's also worth noting, like, as he approached the stage, a band member had seen him walk in, and yeah, they said that he was walking at a pretty fast, determined pace, but he also looked angry and like crazed. So when Gale makes it to the stage, it looks like he appeared to try and crowd surf, but instead he actually heads straight for Dimebag Darrell, who was at the time headbanging in true metal fashion. Of course, this guy's performing. Abbott doesn't even notice the man approach, as his hair was in his face. Gale would then walk up to Dimebag Darrell Abbott, hold him, grab him with one hand, and then fire on him with the other, shooting him at almost point blank range in the back of the head 3 times. Gale then fires on Dimebag 2 more times after he had fallen to the floor. Now, Jeff Thompson, who I mentioned earlier is the band's head of security, rushed the stage and basically attempt to stop and subdue the shooter. Gale then turns his attention to him and after a struggle shoots Thompson, killing him.
and we should say that he's Nathan Gale is 6'5", like 270 pounds. This dude is huge, and so it's not easy for some normal dude to just walk up and take him down. I mean, even the head security guard,
Right.
couldn't get to him. But then again, he had a gun and he just shot him.
Yeah, he was a big dude. He could overpower people. He was
Yeah.
250 pounds, 6'3". He
Was
was
it 6'3" or 6'5"?
He may have been 6'5".
Yeah, it was. I don't know. It's either 6'3" or 6'5", but the dude was up there in height, and yeah, he was really big, former Marine. So it wasn't just a cakewalk to take him down. You know, as we'll see,
Right.
definitely.
Aaron Holk is also, who we mentioned earlier, a former U.S. Marine and security officer for the Alrose Villa nightclub, is also killed by Gale as he attempts to rush the stage. After this happens, a courageous audience member by the name of Nathan Bray actually rushes on stage and he tries to give Dimebag and Thompson CPR in an attempt to keep them alive at any cost. Now, he is also gunned down by Gale as he attempts to save the lives of the 2 severely injured men. John Cat Brooks, who was a drum tech for the Damage Plan band, was shot 3 times but was able to survive. Brooks attempted to disarm Gale but was overpowered by the 6'5", 250-pound gunman. Now, he puts Brooks into a headlock and then basically uses him as a human shield / hostage.
Yeah, and it's also important to mention that the chaos of this event doesn't set in all at once, at least from the audience's perspective. Some of the people in the audience believe that this is some kind of stunt. And even the bartender at Alrose Villa claims that they thought it was just fireworks going off at first. And so they kept pouring drinks and kept going about their routine behind the bar. And people were even pumping their fist and chanting. But it didn't take that long, really, because once Dimebag goes to the ground and his guitar stops playing and a high-pitched screech comes from the amp that the guitar is hooked up to, and as he's laying on the stage down on the ground, people begin to realize what is happening, and they try to escape in fear, of course. And all of the killings had happened less than 5 minutes from the first shot fired. So now you have everyone just going crazy, trying to get out. And this, luckily there weren't that many people. I mean, it's 250 people. But if it had been bigger and had been thousands and thousands of people, it could have been worse.
Oh, totally. This guy definitely had enough ammunition on him as well to do a lot of harm. So Gale continued to fire into the audience, ultimately injuring 7 people in the process. And he was basically firing over the head of John Brooks, who he had taken captive. Now, he faced the audience at the front of the stage, and all while this was happening, 911 had already been called. And within about 3 minutes from the first 911 call, which was made at 10:15, 7 police officers show up. And 6 of the officers move in through the front door, while the 7th officer, James Negemeyer, armed with a Remington 870 12-gauge shotgun, enters the Alrose Villa through the side entrance.
So as Officer James moves through the building, frantic people are yelling and pointing in the direction of the shooter. The nightclub, of course, like we said, is in complete chaos. Officer James says time almost slowed down in that moment. He approached the shooter on the stage from back behind him. And if you go online, like we said earlier, and you watch the video from the surveillance cameras inside the club, you see him come through the back.
Right.
You see the shooter holding the hostage, his hostage, and then you see the officer sort of coming through the back of the stage with his shotgun. And Officer James explains in an interview that he told himself that he needed to aim high because it obviously wouldn't hurt the hostage. And that's the thing, he's 20 feet away or so, and he has to attempt to take down the gunman without hitting the hostage, and he's firing with a shotgun.
Right.
And so it can't be easy to do. Like I said, he's 20 feet away. When he takes the shot and he hits Nathan Gale in the head, killing him instantly. Gale still had 35 rounds of ammunition on him when he was killed. And 2 fans jump up on stage, and one of them being a nurse, and try to administer CPR on Dimebag and Thompson, but are ultimately unsuccessful.
At this point, Vinnie Paul, just witnessing the assassination of his beloved brother, just feet in front of him, stands up behind his drum set and is basically rushed out by security, where he's taken to the tour bus, where he gets into his brother's bed and then begins to weep. That's so sad, man. I can't imagine that.
So Officer James is given some condolence from the crowd. And actually, it was I don't know who this was, but you can see it on video.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was someone in the crowd or if it was part of the security team or something. But someone is following the officer off stage after he has to shoot Nathan Gale, and he says, "You're a hero, and you did the right thing. You saved lives."
Which is true, but it's just really hard. Like, this guy was traumatized. I mean, he walks in and there's bodies laying everywhere. Even though this guy's a cop, he's still a person.
And you can see it on his face in the video.
Right.
He's just eyes wide, mouth slightly agape, walking across the stage after this happened, and you can tell he is shook.
I mean, just to
Very
give you
much.
an idea of the difference between the police, like when Nathan Gale was shot in his head, you hear on the nightclub recording, you hear some guy go like, "Oh, his head's completely gone." And this officer is traumatized, but there's an audience member who almost says it like, "Oh, cool." Like, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and this officer, he was just called in. I mean, he arrived at the club just a couple minutes after the call came in. He was close by.
Right.
He was to my knowledge, he was just on his regular patrol that night. And he got called in, and think about it this way, just real quick, everyone. Just think about it like this. The officer, he's driving in his car, he's performing his usual duties, he gets the call, and within 5 minutes, right, around that time, he's blowing a guy's head off.
Yeah, and you're starting to question, am I going to walk out of this as well? Am I going to walk out alive?
Yeah, I mean, this is so much just put on someone instantly. And luckily, he'd been trained for it, and he did a fantastic job. But it forces him to suffer for a very long time. He had PTSD from this event. He would eventually leave the force. And as of 2011, at least that we know of, he was working a civilian job and was still regularly seeing a counselor. And so just remember that there's a lot of victims tonight. People that were injured, people that were shot and killed, 4 people that were shot and killed. But Officer James is definitely he's definitely a victim as well. I mean, he's been suffering his entire life over this person's, lack of humanity when it comes to this case, this crime.
Right. Now, after they obtain Nathan Gale's body, they do an autopsy, obviously, at the Franklin County Coroner's Office. And when they do the test, they find no trace of drugs in his system at all, antipsychotic medicine or otherwise. And that's sort of relevant information for what we're about to go into, which is the shooter himself, Nathan Gale.
Yeah, and he didn't. Yeah, so he was completely sober, right? I mean, they didn't find alcohol
As far
either.
as we could tell.
Yeah.
So Nathan Gale was actually born on September 11th, 1979. Quite an ominous date of birth, but now Nathan was a native of Maryville, Ohio. Gale was a 1998 graduate in Marysville High, and he joined the U.S. Marines in 2002, but was released for undisclosed reasons some 18 months later. Friends and family would describe Nathan as a huge Pantera fan, and although troubled and having substance abuse problems since high school, he was never known to be violent at all. Gale was known to have moved from job to job, never staying at one place for actually too long, and while in the Marine Corps, Gale received medication for mental problems that he was experiencing. Friends of Gale state that Nathan had exhibited some strange behavior prior to the shooting, and on one occasion, Nathan is reported to have told some friends that he believed Pantera had stolen song lyrics from him that Gale had written, showing his friends a journal with scribbled Pantera lyrics, basically. That's pretty terrifying.
And it's also reported that months before the night at Alrose Villa, Gale began talking to himself and erupting in bursts of laughter for no apparent reason. So he was having some real problems, months, even days, weeks before the actual shooting.
Sure.
And like you said before, he played semi-pro football for the Lima Thunder and was known to listen to Pantera music to get ready for each game. So he would just listen to heavy metal Pantera before each game to get, pumped for it.
I don't blame him.
No. Later in an interview, Gale's mother, Mary Clark, tells reporters that Gale suffered from schizophrenia and would experience intense delusions. She bought the 9mm semi-automatic handgun used in the shooting for her son before he was diagnosed because she was proud of his military service. She says, "I'll never be able to live that part down." Friends of Gale even recall a time where Gale reportedly was petting a dog that wasn't even there.
Gale's former boss at an oil exchange business said that he acknowledged that Nathan was suffering from schizophrenia when he was hired in October of 2003. And this is a quote I pulled from him. Quote, "I would always say, 'Are you okay?' Occasionally, I'd ask him if he was taking his medication. He always told me that he was." He said Gale would later quit because he needed more money and better hours. So, even the people around him and close to him were beginning to notice some odd behavior, to say the least.
Yeah, and 6 months before the shooting at the nightclub, Nathan Gale was a part of an altercation on the stage of another Damage Plan concert in Cincinnati, where he caused $5,000 worth of damage. So it's pretty interesting. 6 months before this happened, like I think we said this earlier, the night of the shooting was the third to last concert on this Damage Plan tour to support the newly released album. And this was, of course, on December 8th. So this was right before they were about to go on holiday break. They were about to go spend holidays with their families, enjoying Christmas and the New Year's, and sort of take a break. This was the third show from the last one. And so 6 months before this, he had been in another show and caused $5,000 worth of damage to equipment that was on stage for Damage Plan. So you have to ask what almost happened at that at that concert 6 months before this one. He caused this damage, but did he almost kill everyone like he did this night and then just kind of change his mind that night? I don't know. It's pretty interesting.
Who knows? It was definitely a sign of trouble. You could have never known in the moment, but, obviously hindsight is 20/20.
Yep.
On a Tuesday in December of 2004, the family would hold a private funeral for Dimebag where the family mourned. At the Arlington Convention Center, however, thousands of people would show up from around the world to show respect. Now, prominent figures such as Zakk Wylde, Eddie Van Halen, and Corey Taylor were all in attendance. I mean, it was a memorial service, but really, when you see videos of this, it was more like a metal concert.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think I said earlier, I don't know if I said this or not, but I remember where I was whenever Dimebag died. Like I said, I'm from Dallas. You grew up.
Right. I've been here since I was 3, so forever.
Yeah, I mean, we've been in Dallas for a long time. So I knew people who knew directly Dimebag. I mean, my mom would my mom's from that whole area, from that time period. She lived in the area when all this was happening.
Right.
And she's met Dimebag and she's met Vinnie at clubs. When I was in my first band, when I was 10 years old, probably like 12 years old, my friend's dad, they went to the funeral, or they went to the memorial.
A couple people we go to work with also went to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, they saw the Kiss for Dimebag. Dimebag's coffin was like a
it
Kiss.
was a Kiss-styled casket.
Exactly, yeah. And so we knew people. We go to work right now, and when I first said we're gonna do Dimebag, they're like, "Oh man, I remember where I was when that happened."
Right.
Misty from work, she said she pulled over to the road and started crying.
Yeah.
So this was a big deal where we were from. I mean, it was huge just in our area.
It was so big. It was almost. Now, the traffic that occurred from this event was almost like a Super Bowl being held in Dallas. I mean, tons of people showed up. It was a massive turnout.
Yeah. And musical performances, like you said, they were held, and it was kind of like a concert in tribute of Dimebag, as well as tons of people in the parking lot just blaring Pantera and Damageplan, drinking in celebration. At one point, Eddie Van Halen would take the stage and say, "I'm here for the same reason as everyone else, to give some love back." And this guy was full of life, and he lived and breathed rock and roll.
Now, after this, Van Halen held up his cell phone to the microphone and played a message left by Abbott after a concert they had played together. The message said, "I just wanted to give you a call to tell you and thank you so much, man, for the most awesome, uplifting, euphoric, spiritual rock and roll extravaganza ever." Now, Abbott left this message for Van Halen, and it was obviously on his mind. It had touched him. And this really was Dimebag Darrell. He was this super happy, childlike, but he was also so happy to be performing with people like Eddie Van Halen. Obviously, these are his idols, and he had grown to be their contemporaries.
Mm-hmm. And they were, Eddie Van Halen, in my opinion, is probably one of the best guitar players of all time.
Oh yeah,
and they were really close. And I think Dimebag was a huge, or Eddie Van Halen was a huge influence to Dimebag whenever Dimebag first started playing.
Most definitely,
he definitely looked up to him as this god of guitar, really, especially for those times.
Now, after he played this message, he would then hold up the famous yellow and black striped Flying V guitar that was featured on the front cover of Van Halen 2, and then he places it in Dimebag's casket and stated, "An original should have an original."
Vinnie Paul would also speak on stage, praising his brother. Clearly saddened by the events that occurred, former Pantera vocalist Phil Anselmo, who, like we said earlier, publicly feuded with the brothers for the past few years, he was featured on the cover of the latest issue of Metal Hammer, saying that Darrell should be severely beaten. And we talked about this earlier. And this was a big thing. He was barred by Vinnie from the memorial service. And although he did express his condolences in a statement.
Right.
And I want to say that Vinnie Paul, when you read an interview, he says that was a huge deal to him. He thought that Phil, by saying those words, that Dimebag should be severely beaten, he said that could have been something that could have pushed someone to do something like this.
Sure.
It could have been the influence, and that someone needed to go on stage and, take beating severely to a whole nother level.
Sure.
And actually kill them. And so, and Vinny and Phil have never made up. Or, well, unfortunately, Vinny passed 5 days ago.
Right.
But Vinny and Phil never made up. I mean, it's said in interviews that Phil reached out a hand to him and tried to talk to him, and Vinny just never wanted to. And something else that Vinny said, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the quotes in front of me, but something else Vinny said was that being with someone like Phil and being in a band with them for so long is akin to being married and then getting divorced.
Right.
And it's like, you don't have to, even if the rest of your family and friends want to talk to this person and want to be with this person and want to be around this person and want you to be around this person, doesn't mean that you have to, or that you have to accept that.
Right.
And it's, I think, I feel like if Dimebag hadn't passed, maybe they could have made up. But I really believe that Vinny believed that Phil's message on a public platform like Metal Hammer
Right.
had a big effect on that night.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, I don't know, Phil has sort of changed a lot too over the years. I think he's sort of calmed down a little bit. But I agree with you. If Dimebag never would have passed, I bet you we would have seen a new Pantera album by now, for sure.
Maybe, for sure. How insane would that be?
I mean, it's been 14 years since Dime passed. So, I mean, who knows what could have happened in that time.
Exactly. Just in 10 years, some major changes could have occurred. And you're right probably about Phil. I don't know. We didn't really talk about this, but Phil is kind of an asshole. I think everyone knows Phil to be an asshole.
Yeah.
No one, I mean, I'm not saying no one, but most people that were into Pantera did not like Phil after all of this happened.
Everyone loves his vocal style. I mean, he is Pantera.
Yeah.
Love him or hate him. That's what it is. But yeah, this guy was exceptionally had quite an attitude on him.
Yeah,
Still does.
Pantera was really made of Dimebag and Phil. Dimebag's guitar and Phil's vocals.
Sure.
Mostly, I would still say, I mean, this is not biased just because we're doing this episode, but mostly Dimebag's guitar. That shit was insane. Just the style of it was just very insane.
Yeah, we'll never hear anything quite like it, man. It's really sad. This story, it's just senseless death to the 10th degree.
And I think it's just so insane that Vinnie Paul just died this Friday. I was visiting my parents in Galveston, Texas, and I woke up and our friend Adam at work sent me the message on Facebook because he knew we were doing the episode on Dimebag. And so he sent me this article that just been written, and I was just like, man, this is insane. I cannot believe that Vinny just died last night.
And I woke up and I had gotten the article from you.
Yeah.
I was just blown away, man.
And then I get out of the guest bedroom at my parents' house, and my mom was like, did you hear about Vinny? And it's like, yeah, man, this is fucking crazy.
Yeah, I heard everybody talking about it, at least like the people who knew the Dallas metal scene specifically. It's, it was sad.
It was a big deal, especially like we've said a million times, where we're from. And so I think, like I said earlier, what I said that, when we have these episodes and you kind of have your thoughts with the family, which is natural because we talk about a lot of sad stuff. We talk about murders and we talk about, we talked about John List a couple episodes ago. We talked about Diane Schuler, where children are dying, and it's very sad. And so you have your thoughts with the families of these people. And just remember that Vinny just died, so they're suffering at this very moment. Like, it's not like the event that happened was 14 years ago, and I'm sure they're still suffering over Dimebag, especially now that wound has been ripped open again with the death of Vinny. But now they're suffering even more. It's not like we're talking about something that happened a long time ago, which we are, but it's like now that Vinny just died, it's like everything is kind of opened up. And so just keep your thoughts with the family of Dimebag and Vinny.
Begins to resurface in traumatic moments, and I guess the one silver lining to this pretty gray cloud is that at the end of the day, Pantera won't die. Bodies do die and people do die, but their music is stronger than ever. I mean, people are still listening to Pantera, and they've had a huge impact on the culture, and for that, they have my thanks, at least.
Yeah, and if you've never really listened to Pantera, and I suspect that a lot of people listening to this have. But if you've never really listened to Pantera, go out there and get them, give them a listen because they're absolutely insane. If you're into hard rock and metal,
Yeah, go get Cowboys from Hell. I was going to tell my first Pantera story.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it was sixth grade for me, and I remember I was in class, and this kid next to me opened up his binder, and there was a CD sitting in the pocket. And he looked at me. I was kind of a metal kid in middle school. I was definitely in the scene, and he grabbed the CD, and he was like, I don't like this CD at all. And he gave it to me. He was like, do you want it? And I was like, yeah, I'll definitely take it. And I had heard of Pantera, but I had never heard Pantera.
Yeah.
And I remember going home, listening to that CD, and it changed my life, like, to say the least. I was already a huge metal fan. I was born and raised a metal fan, but like this, it really gave me a good feeling for what the Texas metal scene was like, and it, I don't know, it deepened my love for the genre, I guess.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I've said this before in the past or I said it today as well, that I'm a drummer. I started playing drums at a very early age, and I started playing metal at a very early age. And when I was probably 17 or 18, and I'm 27 now, so 10 years ago, I'd been drumming for a long time. I've been in multiple bands. I met a guy who was a gigantic Pantera fan. And I had been into Pantera, but not nearly as much as he was. And we started playing, and he knew how to play every single guitar, every single Pantera guitar. He had 3 of Dimebag's signature guitars at his house he would play on. And his name was Gabe. And we basically, I wouldn't say we formed a Pantera cover band, but I learned a lot of Pantera songs on drums.
That's awesome.
I mean, and we would play Pantera just nonstop. So, yeah, it was a big deal. And so that kind of concludes this episode. Check out Pantera. They're amazing if you haven't already.
Definitely.
We release these episodes once a week on Tuesday nights. We record it Tuesday. We release it that night. Check us out at strangelandpod.com. Email us at thestrangelandpodcast@gmail.com. And typically at the end of the episode, we say what we're going to do next week. But we try not to do this very often, but next week we will be taking a break. I'm uprooting my life, not very far away, but me, my girlfriend, and all of our cats and her daughter are moving, and it's been very stressful, so we're packing up at this moment. We're moving everything on Tuesday, the night we're supposed to record. So we're taking 1 week off, but we will be back the next week.
And we will be back refreshed.
Exactly. We'll take a break. It's always good to have breaks from, now and then. Check us out on iTunes, Google Play. We're on Spotify now.
Yes.
Very excited about that. Totally forgot about that.
Yeah, how do we not mention that?
I don't know, but we are 18 episodes in and finally on Spotify.
Definitely.
So check us out on Spotify, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
And remember, everyone, be excellent to each other.